Your brain is slowly decaying, and you don't even notice it. You think you are just tired, but the reality is that your attention span has been systematically dismantled by the modern world. You are losing the ability to think deeply, and it is costing you your future. Welcome to the Masterclass. Today, we are not discussing time management. We are discussing cognitive preservation. Every time you switch tasks, every time you react to a notification, your brain is flooded with cheap dopamine, while your prefrontal cortex, the center of logic and execution, is starved of energy. You are operating on a fraction of your mental capacity. If you want to achieve elite mastery in your career or your finances, you do not need more hours in the day. You need to repair the fractured architecture of your attention. You wake up already tired, not the kind of tired that sleep can fix, not physical exhaustion. Something quieter, heavier, a kind of mental static that follows you from the moment your eyes open. You reach for your phone before your mind has even fully come online. Notifications, emails, messages, news, a quick scroll just to catch up. 10 minutes disappear, then 20, and before your day has even begun, your attention has already been fragmented into pieces. Think about that. You haven't made a single meaningful decision yet, but your brain is already reacting, already consuming, already scattered. You tell yourself it's normal. Everyone does it. This is just how life works now. But something feels off. You sit down to work. You open a document. Maybe it's a report, a proposal, something that actually matters. You read the first paragraph. Halfway through, you feel the urge. Not a thought, not a decision. An urge. Check your phone. Just for a second. You resist it for maybe 10 seconds. Then you give in. A quick glance turns into a reply. The reply turns into another notification. And suddenly, you're somewhere else entirely. 5 minutes later, you come back. But you're not really back. Because part of your mind is still there, on that message, that notification, that small hit of stimulation. You try to read the paragraph again, but it doesn't land the same way. The words feel heavier, slower, harder to process. So you read it again, and somehow something as simple as one page now feels like work. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat down and read 10 pages of a book without interruption, without reaching for your phone, without your mind drifting somewhere else? Most people can't answer that honestly. And that's not a character flaw. That's a signal. A signal that something deeper is happening beneath the surface of your daily behavior. Now zoom out. You go through your day responding. Emails, messages, notifications, small tasks, quick wins, constant movement. It feels productive because you're busy. But by the end of the day, something doesn't add up. You're exhausted. And yet, nothing meaningful moved forward. No real progress. No deep work. No sense of completion. Just a long sequence of reactions. There's a specific kind of frustration that comes with this. You know you're capable of more. You've seen yourself think clearly before. You've had moments, rare moments, where you're fully locked in, fully present, fully focused. But those moments are becoming less frequent, and more importantly, harder to access. Instead, your default state has become this low-grade mental noise. Always slightly distracted, always slightly tired, always one step removed from clarity. This is what modern fatigue actually looks like. Not collapse, but fragmentation. Let me give you a simple scene. It's the evening. You're sitting on the couch. You finish dinner. You tell yourself you're going to relax for a bit. You pick up your phone. Scroll, scroll, scroll. At some point, you realize you're not even enjoying anymore. There's no real satisfaction, no real rest, just motion, endless motion. But you don't stop, because stopping would mean sitting with your own thoughts, and that feels uncomfortable. So you keep scrolling. 30 minutes becomes an hour becomes 2. You look up and the night is gone. And here's the strange part. You're tired but not restored. You consumed but you didn't recharge. So you go to bed carrying the same mental clutter you started the day with, and the cycle repeats. This is where most people misunderstand their own condition. They think they're overworked, but they're not. They're overstimulated. There's a difference. Overwork drains you through effort. Overstimulation drains you through fragmentation. One builds something, even if it's exhausting. The other leaves you with nothing but noise. And this is why you can go through an entire day, constantly engaged, constantly active, and still feel like you did nothing that actually mattered. Because attention, not time, is the real currency of your life. And right now, that currency is being spent in fragments. Tiny, scattered pieces across dozens of inputs, none of them deep enough to create anything meaningful. Let me ask you another question. How often do you finish a task without checking something else in between? Not often. How often do you sit in silence without reaching for stimulation? Almost never. How often do you feel mentally clear, sharp, fully in control of your thoughts? Be honest. Because this is the quiet crisis most people never name. It doesn't look dramatic. There's no visible breakdown, no obvious failure. From the outside, everything looks fine. You're functioning, you're working, you're keeping up. But internally, something is eroding. Your ability to stay with a thought, your ability to go deep, your ability to hold focus long enough to produce something meaningful. And without that, everything else starts to suffer. Your work becomes shallow. Your decisions become reactive. Your creativity declines. Even your sense of self starts to blur because you're constantly pulled in different directions. This is not random, and it's not temporary. It's a pattern, a system. And if you don't understand what's actually driving it, you will keep trying to fix it at the surface level. You'll try to manage your time better. You'll try to be more disciplined. You'll blame yourself for not having enough willpower. But none of those approaches address what's really happening. Because this isn't just about behavior. It's about how your brain is being conditioned every single day by the environment you live in. And until you see that clearly, you'll keep fighting the wrong battle. So before we talk about solutions, we need to go deeper. We need to understand the real problem. Because once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think their problem is discipline. They think they lack willpower, that they're too distracted, too easily pulled away, not focused enough. So they try to fix it the only way they know how. They push harder. They tell themselves, I just need to concentrate. I need to stop procrastinating. I need to be more disciplined. And for a short period of time, it works. They force themselves into focus. They resist the urge to check their phone. They try to stay locked in. But it doesn't last. Because what they're fighting isn't a lack of discipline. It's a neurological pattern that has been quietly trained into their brain over years. Let me explain. Every time you switch tasks, every time you move from your work to your phone, from your phone to your email, from your email to a random thought, you're not just losing a few seconds. You are paying a cognitive cost. This is where a concept called attentional blink comes in. Your brain does not smoothly transition between tasks the way you think it does. It actually goes through a brief period where it cannot fully process new information, a kind of temporary blindness. You look at the next task, but you don't fully see it. You read the words, but they don't fully register. So you compensate. You reread. You slow down. You lose momentum. And over time, this constant switching creates a state where deep focus feels unnatural. Not impossible, but uncomfortable. Now layer something else on top of that. Cognitive residue. Every time you leave a task unfinished, even for a moment, part of your attention stays behind. You open a message while working part of your mind stays with that message. You check social media, part of your mind stays with what you saw. You jump between 5 different inputs. In 10 minutes, your attention is now split into 5 different directions. So when you come back to your original work, you are not bringing your full mind with you. You are bringing fragments. And this is why your work feels heavier than it should. This is why something that should take 30-minute stretches into 2 hours. Because you're not just doing the task. You're dragging cognitive residue from everything else you touched before it. Think about that. Now, let's go one layer deeper. Dopamine. Most people hear that word and think of pleasure, motivation, reward. But in your brain, dopamine is more about anticipation than satisfaction. It drives you toward something. And the modern world has learned how to exploit that perfectly. Every notification, every message, every new piece of content, it offers a small spike. Not enough to satisfy you, just enough to keep you coming back. This is what's called dopamine desensitization. When your brain is constantly exposed to small, frequent rewards, it starts to recalibrate. The baseline shifts. Normal, low-stimulation activities, like reading, thinking, working deeply, no longer feel engaging. Not because they are boring, but because your brain has been trained to expect higher levels of stimulation. So when you sit down to do something meaningful, something that requires depth, it feels slow. It feels difficult. It feels almost painful. And your brain looks for relief. So it nudges you. Check your phone. Open something else. Take a quick break. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is trying to return to the level of stimulation it has become used to. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to sit down and focus, and within seconds felt an almost physical resistance? A restlessness? An urge to escape? That's not laziness. That's withdrawal. Withdrawal from constant stimulation. And here's where it becomes dangerous. Because while your dopamine system is being overstimulated, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and deep thinking, is being underused. And like any system in the body, what you don't use, you weaken. So over time, 2 things happen simultaneously. Your craving for stimulation increases. Your capacity for focus decreases. That gap is where your frustration lives. You want to focus, but your brain is no longer optimized for it. So you blame yourself. You think something is wrong with you, but the truth is far more uncomfortable. You've been trained, conditioned by an environment that profits from your distraction, and the myth of multitasking only makes it worse, because it gives you a false sense of productivity. You think you're handling multiple things at once, but in reality, you're rapidly switching between them, and each switch carries a cost. A small drop in efficiency, a small increase in mental fatigue, a small fragmentation of your attention. Individually, these costs seem insignificant, but accumulated over an entire day, over weeks, over years, they reshape how your brain operates. This is why you can no longer access the level of focus you once had. Not because you lost it, but because it has been systematically eroded, quietly, gradually, without you noticing, until one day you sit down to do something important and realize that staying focused for even 20 minutes feels like a challenge. Let that sink in. Because this is not just about productivity. This is about your ability to think, to reason, to create, to make decisions that actually move your life forward. And if that ability continues to decline, everything else follows. Your work, your relationships, your sense of control. So no, this is not a time management issue. It's not a motivation problem. It's not even a discipline problem. It's a cognitive conditioning problem. And until you address it at that level, you will keep trying to fix the symptoms while the root cause continues to grow. Now the question becomes, if your attention is being shaped by forces you don't see, what would it look like to take that control back? That's where we go next. There's a pattern you start to notice when you study people who operate at an elite level. Not just successful people, but individuals who consistently produce at a high level over long periods of time, without burning out, without losing clarity. They don't rely on motivation. They don't rely on bursts of inspiration. And more importantly, they don't leave their attention unprotected. One of the clearest examples of this was Steve Jobs. Most people remember him for innovation, vision, design, but very few people pay attention to something far more fundamental: how aggressively he simplified his environment. You've seen the image: black turtleneck, blue jeans, same shoes, day after day. At first glance, it looks like a personal style choice. Minimalist, iconic, consistent, but it wasn't about style. It was about conservation. Jobs understood something most people ignore. Every decision you make consumes cognitive energy. What to wear, what to eat, what to respond to, what to prioritize. Individually, these decisions seem small, but together, they create what psychologists call decision fatigue. And decision fatigue doesn't just make you tired. It degrades the quality of your thinking. So Jobs made a deliberate move. He eliminated as many low-value decisions as possible, not because he couldn't handle them, but because he refused to waste mental energy on things that didn't matter. Think about that. He wasn't trying to do more. He was trying to protect the capacity to think clearly. Now zoom out beyond the wardrobe. Look at how Apple products were designed under his leadership. Clean interfaces, minimal options, controlled environments. This wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a philosophy. Reduce noise, eliminate friction, focus attention. Because clarity doesn't happen by accident. It has to be engineered. And Jobs applied that same principle to his life. He was known for intense focus during work sessions. Long stretches of uninterrupted thinking, deep engagement with a single problem at a time, no constant switching, no fragmented attention. And this is the part most people miss. That level of focus wasn't a personality trait. It was a result of constraints. He removed the things that would have pulled his attention away. He built an environment where distraction had no easy entry point. Let me ask you something. How many open loops are in your life right now? Unfinished tasks, pending messages, notifications waiting to be checked. Each one of those is a small hook in your attention. Each one pulls just a little. Individually, they seem harmless, but collectively, they create a constant background tension, a mental load you carry without realizing it. Jobs understood this intuitively. He didn't allow unnecessary loops to exist. He closed them, eliminated them, or never created them in the first place. Because every open loop is a claim on your focus. And if too many claims exist at once, your attention gets diluted. This is why his approach can feel extreme, because it is. But that's the point. Elite performance often looks extreme from the outside because it operates on a different set of priorities. While most people are trying to manage distraction, he was eliminating it at the source. While most people were reacting to incoming noise, he was designing systems that prevented the noise from reaching him. And here's where it becomes uncomfortable, because his strategy is not complicated. It's actually very simple. Remove what doesn't matter. Protect what does. But simple doesn't mean easy, because to do that, you have to make choices most people avoid. You have to say no. You have to tolerate silence. You have to sit with the discomfort of not being constantly stimulated. And most people never build that tolerance, so they default to the path of least resistance. More input, more options, more noise, and slowly their ability to think deeply starts to erode. Jobs went in the opposite direction. Fewer inputs, fewer decisions, more depth, more clarity. Let me give you a different angle. Imagine two people with the same level of intelligence, same skills, same opportunities. One of them protects their attention like a scarce resource. The other allows it to be fragmented across dozens of small inputs every day. Who do you think produces better work over time? Who makes better decisions? Who builds something meaningful? The difference is not talent. It's not effort. It's attention. And how that attention is managed or mismanaged on a daily basis. This is what the case study reveals. Not that you need to copy someone's wardrobe, but that you need to understand the principle behind it. Simplification is not about aesthetics. It's about cognitive survival. Because in a world designed to fragment your focus, the ability to maintain clarity becomes competitive advantage. And more than that, it becomes a form of control. Control over your thoughts. Control over your decisions. Control over the direction of your life. So the real question is not whether you can work harder. It's whether you are willing to remove the things that are quietly making you weaker. Because once you see how much of your mental energy is being drained by unnecessary inputs, you start to realize something. The problem isn't that you don't have enough time. It's that your attention is being spent on things that don't deserve it. And until that changes, no system, no strategy, no amount of effort will fully solve the problem. Because you'll still be operating with a divided mind. Now, here's where it gets even more important. Because the environment you live in today is not neutral. It's not just busy. It is actively shaping your behavior, which means if you don't build your own system, you'll default to someone else's. And that system has one goal, to keep your attention exactly where it is, scattered, reactive, and under control. So let's expose that system, because once you see how it works, you'll understand why breaking free requires more than just intention. It requires strategy. At this point, you might be thinking this is just about habits. Checking your phone too often, getting distracted, losing focus. But that's only the surface. Underneath your daily behavior, there is a system running, quiet, predictable, extremely efficient, and most people never see it. They only experience the result. Let's slow this down. Every action you repeat, every time you reach your phone, every time you escape a difficult task, follows a loop. Not randomly, precisely. It starts with a trigger, something small, a moment of boredom, a difficult sentence, a slight feeling of discomfort, maybe a notification sound. Maybe nothing external at all, just a thought. That's enough. Your brain registers as friction, and immediately it looks for relief. This is where the craving begins. Not a strong, obvious desire. Something subtler. A pull. Check something. Switch tasks. Take a break. It feels harmless, almost reasonable. And this is where most people lose awareness. Because the craving doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like a solution. So you respond. You open your phone. You switch tabs. You check email. You scroll. The action itself is quick, effortless, and then comes a reward, a small release, a hit of novelty, a distraction from discomfort, a brief sense of relief, not satisfaction. Relief, that distinction matters, because your brain is not learning that the action was meaningful. It's learning that the action removed discomfort, and that's enough to reinforce the behavior. So the loop closes. Trigger, craving, response, reward, and then it resets. Now here's where it becomes dangerous. This loop doesn't just repeat. It strengthens. Every time you go through it, the pathway in your brain becomes more efficient, faster, more automatic, less conscious. What started as a choice becomes a reflex. You don't decide to check your phone. You just do it. You don't think about switching tasks. You just find yourself somewhere else. And because each individual loop feels small, you don't question it. But over the course of a day, this loop can run dozens, even hundreds of times. Each one fragmenting your attention a little more. Each one training your brain to avoid depth. Let me give you a familiar scenario. You're working on something that actually matters, a report, a plan, a decision that requires thinking. You hit a point where it gets difficult, not impossible, just mentally demanding. There's no immediate answer, no quick resolution, just friction. And in that exact moment, the system activates. Your brain offers you an exit. Check your phone, not because you need to, but because it knows that action will remove the discomfort. So you take it, and instantly, the difficulty disappears, replaced by something easier, lighter, more stimulating. And your brain records that. Next time you feel this, do this again. Think about that. You are not just avoiding the task. You are training yourself to escape the exact moments where growth happens. Because deep work always begins with friction. Always. And if your default response to friction is escape, you will never stay long enough to reach depth. Now expand this beyond work. You feel slightly uncomfortable sitting alone. You reach for your phone. You feel a moment of stress. You open something. You feel a gap in conversation. You check something. These are not isolated behaviors. They are expressions of the same loop. And the modern environment is built to feed it. Endless content, infinite scroll, notifications engineered to interrupt, algorithms designed to learn exactly what keeps you engaged. This is not accidental. It's engineered because your attention is valuable. And the longer they keep it, the more they profit. So the system is optimized for one thing, keeping you inside the loop. Not satisfied, not fulfilled, just engaged enough to stay. And over time, something subtle begins to happen. Your baseline shifts. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels unnatural. Focus feels like effort. And distraction feels like relief. That inversion is the real problem. Because once your brain starts associating relief with distraction, you lose the ability to sit with difficulty. And without that ability, you lose access to deep thinking, creative problem solving, meaningful work. Let me ask you something. When you encounter something challenging, do you lean into it? Or do you instinctively look for an exit? Be honest, because that single pattern determines more than you think. It shapes your output, your decisions, your long-term trajectory. Now, here's the part most people never consider. This loop doesn't just affect your productivity. It affects your identity. Because over time, your brain starts to define what is normal. If you constantly react, you become reactive. If you constantly switch, you become scattered. If you constantly avoid difficulty, you become someone who cannot tolerate it, not by intention, by repetition. This is how behavior becomes identity. Quietly, gradually, without a clear moment where it happens. And once that identity is established, it reinforces the loop even further. I'm just bad at focusing. I can't sit still. I work better under pressure. These are not truths. They are conclusions drawn from conditioned behavior. And the longer you believe them, the harder it becomes to break the pattern. But here's the reality. This system only works as long as it remains invisible. The moment you see the loop clearly trigger, craving, response, reward, you create space. Space between the urge and the action. And in that space you have a choice. Not an easy choice, but a real one, to follow the loop or to interrupt it. And that interruption is where control begins. But awareness alone is not enough, because you can understand the system perfectly and still fall back into it tomorrow. So the question becomes, how do you actually break it? Not in theory, but in practice. Because if you don't replace this loop with something stronger, you will default right back to it. That's what we're going to build next. But before we go there, you need to decide something. Not later. Now, let me stop you for a moment, not to explain something new, but to ask you something direct. Are you just listening to this, or are you actually seeing yourself in it? Because there's a difference. Understanding this system intellectually is easy. You can nod along. You can agree. You can recognize the patterns. But recognition without action changes nothing. And most people stay right there. They consume insight the same way they consume everything else, quickly, passively, without interruption to their behavior. So let me ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it, not just let it pass. How many times have you realized something about your habits and then gone right back to them the next day? Think about that. Because if that's where this ends, just another realization, another moment of clarity that fades, then you are still inside the system, just more aware of it. And awareness without change can become its own trap. It feels like progress, but it isn't. So here's a decision point. Not later. Now, are you willing to interrupt your own patterns? Not once, not when it's convenient, but consistently. Because what we're about to build is not information. It's a system. And if you don't engage with it seriously, it will not work. So decide. Are you just observing this, or are you ready to take control of it? Because from this point forward, passive listening is no longer enough. So now we move from awareness to reconstruction. Because if you don't replace the system that's currently running your behavior, it will simply resume control the moment this video ends. What you need is not motivation. You need a structure that your brain can operate inside. A system that reduces friction for focus and increases friction for distraction. That's what this framework is designed to do. Not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently. We'll call it the 90-minute isolation protocol. And it works because it aligns with how your brain actually functions, not how you wish it did. Let's break it down. Underscore, 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 underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore the first layer is environmental architecture. This is where most people fail before they even begin. They try to focus in the same environment that trained them to be distracted. Same desk, same phone, same notifications, same open tabs. And then they rely on willpower to resist everything. That's not discipline. That's friction. And friction always wins over time. So the first move is simple but uncomfortable. You remove the triggers. Physically, your phone is not on your desk, not face down, not on silent, out of reach, ideally out of the room. Notifications are not managed. They are eliminated. Tabs are not minimized. They are closed because every visible option is a potential cognitive hook, and your brain will take it the moment your focus dips. Let me ask you something. If distraction is one step away, how long do you think it will take before you reach for it? Exactly. So don't rely on restraint. Remove access. That's step one. Underscore, 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 underscore the second layer is single tasking, not mostly focused. Now I'll just check one thing quickly. Single tasking means one defined objective for a defined period of time without deviation. You're not allowed to switch. Not because switching is bad, but because switching resets your cognitive state. Every time you leave the task, you pay the cost we talked about earlier: attentional blink, cognitive residue, loss of momentum. So the rule is simple. You stay, even when it gets uncomfortable. Especially when it gets uncomfortable, because that discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's the threshold. Most people never cross it. They feel resistance and they leave, which means they never reach depth. You will, but only if you stay. Underscore, 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 underscore. The third layer is the 90-minute block. This is not arbitrary. Your brain operates in cycles of energy and focus, often referred to as ultradian rhythms. Roughly 90 minutes of peak cognitive performance, followed by a need for recovery. So instead of forcing yourself to focus all day, you work with that rhythm. You commit to one 90-minute session, not 5, not an entire day. 1. Fully protected, fully isolated, no interruptions, no switching, no escape. And here's what matters. The goal is not to feel good during the session. The goal is to stay inside it. There will be moments where your mind drifts, moments where you feel the urge to check something, moments where the task feels slow, even frustrating. That's expected. That's part of the reset, because your brain is recalibrating away from constant stimulation. So don't interpret discomfort as failure. Interpret it as adaptation. Underscore, 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 underscore. Now, here's where most people sabotage themselves. They break the rule just once. They check something quickly. Respond to one message. Look at one notification, and the entire session collapses. Because the moment you reintroduce stimulation, your brain shifts back to the old loop. So the standard has to be absolute, not perfect forever, but absolute within the block. 90 minutes. Clean. Underscore, 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 underscore. The fourth layer is what I call digital sunset, because what you do at the end of your day determines the quality of your mind the next morning. If your last 2 hours are filled with scrolling, notifications, and fragmented input, you don't just relax. You overload your system right before sleep, and that carries into the next day. So the rule is simple. You define a cutoff, a point where digital input stops. No phone, no laptop, no endless consumption. Not because technology is bad, but because your brain needs a period of low stimulation to reset. Instead, you allow space. Reading, thinking, walking, silence. At first, this will feel uncomfortable, almost empty. But that's because your baseline has been elevated for too long. Give it time. Your system will recalibrate. And when it does, something interesting happens. Your capacity for focus the next day increases, not dramatically, but noticeably. Underscore, 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 underscore. Underscore fifth layer is intentional recovery. This is where people misunderstand rest. They think rest is passive consumption, scrolling, watching, distracting, but that doesn't restore your attention. It extends the loop. Real recovery is low stimulation. It's allowing your mind to settle. No input, no noise, just space. This could be a walk without your phone, sitting without doing anything, letting your thoughts run without interruption. And here's the key. You're not trying to be productive in this time. You're allowing your system to reset, because without recovery, focus degrades. Even with the best structure. Underscore, 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 underscore. Now let's address the resistance, because there will be resistance. You will feel the urge to break the rules. You will tell yourself, just this once. I'll start tomorrow. This isn't realistic. That's not logic. That's the old system defending itself. Because you are interrupting a pattern that has been reinforced hundreds of times. So expect friction. Expect discomfort. Expect your brain to push back. That doesn't mean it's not working. It means it is. Let me ask you something. Do you want a system that feels easy or a system that actually changes you? Because those are not the same. This protocol works because it removes negotiation. You don't decide in the moment. You decide in advance. And then you follow the structure, not based on how you feel, but based on what you committed to. Underscore, 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 underscore. Now here's what happens if you do this consistently. Not perfectly, but consistently. Your tolerance for depth increases. Your need for constant stimulation decreases. Your mind becomes quieter, clearer, more stable. And tasks that once felt difficult start to feel manageable, then natural, then even satisfying, because your dopamine system begins to recalibrate. Away from quick hits toward sustained engagement. That's when real work becomes possible. Not forced, but accessible. underscore 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 underscore. So start simple. One 90-minute block, one controlled environment, one commitment to stay, no distractions, no exceptions, and then observe what happens, not just in your output, but in your mind, because what you're rebuilding here is not just focus, it's control. And once you regain that, everything else begins to change. Now slow this down, because this is the part most people skip. They understand the system. They see the problem. They even try the framework. But they never stop long enough to confront what all of this actually means for their life. So let's do that now. Not quickly, not casually. Honestly, let me ask you something. When was the last time you experienced true, uninterrupted clarity? Not partial focus, not multitasking, not background noise. I mean full presence, where your mind was stable, engaged, and completely under your control. Can you remember it? Or has it been so long that it feels distant, almost unfamiliar? Think about that, because if clarity has become rare in your life, that's not just an inconvenience. That's a shift in your baseline. And baselines shape everything. They determine how you think, how you work, how you make decisions. They determine what you believe is normal. Now, go one level deeper. Look at your current patterns. Not what you intend to do, what you actually do. How often do you reach for your phone without thinking? How often do you interrupt yourself in the middle of something important? How often do you choose stimulation over stillness? Be precise, because your future is not built on intentions. It's built on repetition. Let me ask you something harder. If nothing changes, if you continue operating exactly like this for the next 5 years, what does your life look like? Not in vague terms. Specifically, your work, your ability to think, your ability to focus long enough to create something meaningful. Does it improve, or does it slowly decline? Be honest, because most people assume things will somehow get better on their own. But systems don't correct themselves. They reinforce themselves. Now consider this. Right now, your attention is being trained every single day. The only question is, by you or by something else? Because if you are not deliberately shaping how you focus, then your environment is doing it for you. And your environment is not designed for your growth. It's designed for your engagement. There's a difference. Let me ask you something that most people avoid. Are you in control of your attention? Or are you reacting to whatever demands it? Pause on that, because control is not what you say. It's what you can sustain. If you cannot sit in silence for 10 minutes without reaching for stimulation, what does that say about your control? If you cannot complete a single task without interruption, what does that say about your discipline? These are not judgments. They are indicators. Signals of how your system is currently operating. Now take it one step further. What are you not building because of this? What ideas have you not developed? What decisions have you delayed? What level of work have you never reached because you couldn't stay with something long enough? That's the real cost, not the lost minutes, the lost depth, the lost potential, the version of you that requires sustained attention but never gets the chance to exist. Let that land. Because this is not just about fixing a habit. It's about reclaiming capacity, the ability to think clearly, to stay present, to engage deeply with something that matters. And without that, you don't just lose productivity, you lose direction. So here's the final question. Not about your past, not about your habits, about your standard. What level of attention are you willing to accept from yourself? Fragmented, reactive, constantly pulled in different directions, or focused, intentional, controlled? Because whatever you tolerate becomes your identity, and whatever becomes your identity shapes your life. So don't answer this quickly. Sit with it, because the next step is not about understanding. It's about deciding who you are going to be from this point forward. Here's the part most people don't want to face. The world you're living in is not neutral. It is not passively distracting you. It is actively competing for your attention. Every platform, every notification, every piece of content is designed with one objective: to keep you engaged, not fulfilled, not focused, engaged, because your attention is an asset, and if you don't protect it, it will be extracted relentlessly. Think about that. The more scattered your attention becomes, the easier you are to control, the easier you are to influence, the harder it becomes for you to think independently, to go deep, to build anything that requires sustained effort. And this doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, quietly. You don't notice the decline in real time. You only feel the symptoms: the fog, the fatigue, the constant pull toward distraction. And if you do nothing, it compounds. Your focus weakens. Your standards drop. Your ability to do meaningful work slowly erodes. Not because you chose it, but because you allowed it. So understand this clearly. Inaction is not neutral. Inaction is alignment with the system that's already shaping you. And that system does not have your best interests in mind. So the question is no longer whether this is happening. It is. The question is whether you're going to interrupt it or continue drifting inside it. Because from here, there are only two directions, and you don't get to stand still. So now we arrive at the only part that actually matters, not the insight, not the awareness, the decision. Because everything you've heard up to this point means nothing if it does not translate into action. And action, real action, does not begin when you feel ready. It begins when you decide that your current standard is no longer acceptable. Right now, your attention is being negotiated, pulled in different directions, fragmented by default, controlled by whatever demands it next. And every day you allow that to continue, you reinforce it. You make it easier to stay distracted, harder to stay focused. You train yourself into weakness, quietly, consistently. So understand this clearly. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to work harder. It's about refusing to let your attention be controlled by anything that hasn't earned it. That's the shift. And it's not theoretical. It's immediate. You don't need more time. You don't need a perfect plan. You need to start today, not later, not when things calm down, because they won't. The environment will not become less distracting. The system will not slow down. If anything, it will become more aggressive, more refined, more effective at capturing you. So if you're waiting for the right moment, you're already losing. Let me ask you something. What would change if, starting today, you protected just 90 minutes of your attention like it actually mattered? No phone, no switching, no escape, just one block of real focus. What would happen to your work, your clarity, your sense of control? Because most people never test this. They assume they need hours. They assume they need perfect conditions. But the truth is simpler. You need one decision executed consistently. And that decision is this: I do not break focus. Not when it's inconvenient. Not when it's uncomfortable. Not when your brain asks for relief. Because that moment, that exact moment when you want to escape, is where discipline is built, not before, not after. There, you either stay or you reinforce the habit of leaving. And every time you stay, something shifts. Your tolerance increases. Your mind stabilizes. Your confidence grows, not because you felt motivated, but because you followed through. That's how identity changes. Not through intention, through repetition. You become someone who can focus by focusing. You become someone who has control by exercising it. There is no shortcut. Now, this will not feel natural at first. It will feel restrictive, uncomfortable, even unnecessary, because you've been operating inside a different system for so long. A system built on reaction, on stimulation, on constant input. So when you remove that, there's silence. And in that silence, your mind will push back. It will look for something to grab onto, something to escape into. That's the moment most people fail. They interpret that discomfort as a signal to stop. It's not. It's a signal that you're finally outside the loop. And if you can stay there, even briefly, you begin to reclaim control. So don't aim for perfection. Aim for consistency. One session, done properly, then another, and another. You build this the same way it was broken, through repetition, but this time deliberately, because the goal is not just to complete tasks. It's to rebuild a mind that can handle depth, that can stay with complexity, that can think clearly without needing constant stimulation. That's power. Real power, not external, internal. And once you have that, everything changes. Your work improves. Your decisions sharpen. Your sense of direction stabilizes. Because you're no longer reacting. You are choosing. So this is the line. Right here. You either continue living in a state of fragmented attention, or you take responsibility for it. No one is coming to fix this for you. No system will protect your focus unless you build it. So decide, and then act on that decision immediately. Because discipline is not something you think about. It's something you do. And the moment to start is now. If you're ready to stop surrendering your focus to algorithms and start operating at a higher standard, subscribe, and commit to the discipline of deep work.